Grab your Fire Sword +1 and get ready to slay a beholder, because today on Hit the Table, we are reviewing the Dungeons & Dragons starter set. There is hardly a soul in the gaming community that has not heard of Dungeons & Dragons. It's probably the single most important role-playing game in history. 4E is the very definition of a crunchy RPG system. It had loads of mechanics and tons of rules that you had to learn before you could even approach playing the game. This pushed a lot of experienced gamers away from the system and towards other games like Pathfinder that helped to emulate the feeling of old school D&D with a little bit more accuracy. But even more significantly, the complexity of 4th edition kept a lot of new players from approaching the table for the first time. Wizards of the Coast was rightfully criticized during this time period for alienating its fanbase and changing a winning formula. I, for one, was a huge fan of 4th edition, but I can understand why there was such a huge backlash at the time. The fact of the matter is, the system was more worried with combat mechanics and number crunching than it was with storytelling. A lot of the plot elements took a back seat to stat blocks and tables. That's why D&D 5th edition is such a huge deal to the role-playing community. Wizards has taken the opposite approach with this one, releasing the game to be play-tested by the public 2 years before it was intended to be published allowed it to be refined by the fans. We could decide exactly what kind of game we wanted. Through intensive surveys and data gathering, the company has been able to discover exactly what makes Dungeons & Dragons special in the hearts of its fans, and what elements are required to allow this version to live up to the legacy of the franchise. Finally, almost a full year after the beta ended, Dungeons & Dragons has been released into the wild. First with a free PDF describing the basic rules of the system that you can find at Wizards' website. But the first physical product you can purchase from the store is perfect for a first-time role player, for someone who isn't familiar not just with D&D, but with the concept of the RPG in general. It's the D&D starter set. This thing is a steal at $19.99. You get a load of great content that will help act as an introduction to Dungeons & Dragons, and that will keep you playing for years to come. But before I give my full review, let's take a look at what's inside this awesome box. So first off, let's take a look at the box itself. It's a great tribute to the way that many people were introduced to D&D in previous editions, the red box. This is basically the exact same image you would see on that product, just with some souped up art. And I do have to say that the art in general for the starter set is very impressive, and it makes me ache to get my hands on the player's handbook because there's going to be so much more of it. Once you're ready to pop the box open, you'll find a pretty essential part of this game, and that is, of course, your dice. These are some pretty nice dice, I think. They feel good in the hand. They're a nice blue, kind of opal color, a little textured to them. You'll probably want to go out and buy your own eventually, but it's nice that if you're feeling a little intimidated to walk into your local game shop, Dungeons & Dragons provides these here for you. If you're not familiar with the way the game works, generally what happens is you tell a story with your friends, and when a time comes to make an important decision or to take an action, you'll actually roll this 20-sided die. And depending on a number that the Dungeon Master comes up with, you'll succeed or fail in that action. That's the core element of how this game works, and then the rest of these dice kind of play in when you need to deal damage to an opponent or in various other circumstances. Next up, of course, is your rulebook, and this is actually surprisingly slim. It's only about 32 pages, but it gives you everything you need for how to actually tell your stories, for how to roll for combat. It's got some nice little tables here with some extra information. This one's on how to hide and how to perceive. It's got some beautiful artwork, obviously. It's a very simplistic look at how to play Dungeons & Dragons, but that's pretty nice for new players. It's not overly intimidating, and you can really read through it in a couple of minutes without too much difficulty. An important thing to note is that this book does not include the rules for character creation. It gives you a lot of other information, but if you wanted to actually build your own character, you could do that with the basic rules that you can find on the website. That has a little bit more of an in-depth text. Just below that, you're going to find the first ever published adventure for 5th edition. It's called The Lost Mine of Phandelver. It takes place in the Forgotten Realms universe of Faerun, which is apparently going to be the primary setting of this version of D&D, which is a little different than the past. This is a really great little text. It's 64 pages. It should run your characters all the way from levels 1 to 5, I believe. And that's really cool because if you're a little worried about creating your own campaign, if you're not quite ready to worry about the creative aspects of D&D and you just want to focus in running the game, this book will allow you to do this. It will allow you to tell a full story that's already been pre-made for you. And it's really got some beautiful art on the inside cover. You can see how great the cartography is here. Your players are going to love to look at this. And then just everything about this shows an attention to detail that, not to say that 4th edition didn't have that, but something is really wonderful about the way this particular product is laid out. And I liked it almost more than the rulebook just because it was something new that I could bite my teeth into. Another important note is that at the back of the book, you actually have a pretty large list of monsters. What's great about this is that it has a load of monsters and enemies that you can use in your own adventures, so that if you want to continue past the Lost Mine of Phandelver, you'll be able to do that, and you'll have the tools that you'll need as a game master to weave whatever kind of story you want to. It's going to be a few months before we see the monster manual, and so this gives you a little sample of what we're going to see in that book, but it also allows you to have the freedom to build your own story. Last but not least, the game gives you a series of character sheets that you can use in lieu of character creation. Like I said, the rules for character creation aren't actually in the starter set. You have to go to the PDF for that. And so if you'd rather just give your players a pre-made character so they don't have to worry about that kind of complexity yet, you can do that with these. They include everything that you're going to need to play that character. You've got your stats along the side here, including some skills. You've got your class, your race, a background, and your alignment. A lot of really cool information on this sheet, including your weaponry. You've got, what I really love is that it gives you personality traits, ideals, a bond with another character, some personality flaws. So this little corner here is really focused on storytelling as opposed to the mechanics of the game, and that's refreshing, I think. On the back, you've got some other information that's kind of cool. You've got racial information. So for example, you're talking about a human being here, and where would a human being be placed in the world, and what are some names that you could use? That's some cool stuff that you would find in the player's handbook that you're not gonna be able to get anywhere else. It even shows you how to level up your character as they gain experience points and what kind of choices you'll have in those circumstances. They also give you a blank character sheet in case you do want to create your own character, but they only give you one, so you're going to want to either Xerox this or scan it into your computer, but I'm also sure that they've got a PDF file on Wizard's website that you can use as well, so this might not necessarily be completely necessary, but it's nice that they decided to include it. So in case you haven't figured it out already, I'm pretty enthusiastic about what Wizards is doing with the starter set and what they're doing with D&D in general. I really like that they're taking a look back at what worked in previous editions that they've kind of set aside in the past. They're reincorporating a lot of these old ideas, but also bringing in new ideas that we haven't seen before, trying to refine mechanics that might not have worked in the past. Still, it doesn't feel like they're going for a complete overhaul like what they did with 4th edition. This feels a lot more in line with even 2nd edition AD&D, which is pretty awesome because I think that's one of the more popular versions of this game. Going piece by piece, I've already mentioned that I really like the dice that they've included in this set. And I know there's not a whole lot that you can really say about these little things, but they are very important tools to Dungeons & Dragons, and if they weren't included, there's a lot of people who might be kind of turned off. You really need them to be able to play the game, and not everyone has a hobby store close by that they can go to and that's very accessible to them. So just having these dice in the starter set is kind of welcoming and inclusive and brings a lot of people into the fold. Probably my favorite part of the starter set is the rulebook, and that's because even though Wizards has been very generous in offering their rules for free online, I like having a physical copy. I like being able to flip through the pages and kind of being able to reference at the table when I need to pull out a certain rule that I might not be very familiar with. This is really cool for that, but it's also great because it's super concise and super simple. This is 32 pages. You can breeze through it, and just about anyone, even someone not familiar with role-playing games, will get how to play this game by the time they've finished reading it. Obviously, I can't go rule for rule and tell you why I love this system so much. That would just take up way too much time. But I have done a review of the Basic Rules PDF, and I'll include that link in the description bar down below. I definitely suggest you read through that because I had some ideas and some inspiration as I was working through this pretty lengthy document. It's about 98 pages. This is a really condensed version of what they're doing with that PDF, but it still gives you everything that you need. But what I really love about this game so far is that it's kind of modular in its approach. There's obviously some rules that you should use no matter what, but there's increasing complexity as you go along. So you could play a full campaign of Dungeons & Dragons with just this 32-page rulebook from the starter set. You could then go on to simplified character creation with the PDF online. And then, of course, the Player's Handbook is coming out later this month, which is going to offer even more complexity in terms of your options. Any of these approaches is a great way to play D&D. It all really depends on who you're playing with and what your play style is. Despite its age, there's still an energetic youthfulness to the rules for Dungeons & Dragons, and I can't wait to see how it plays out at my table. It's clear that Mike Mearls and his team at Wizards have really put a lot of time and energy into listening to the criticisms and the remarks of the people who are playtesting and putting them all into one package that really makes it seem like the ultimate version of D&D. I haven't yet had the chance to read through all of The Lost Mine of Phandelver, but I'm very excited to see how my players react to it at the table. There's a lot of branching storylines in here, there's a lot of variety in the enemies, and I love that they give you those monsters at the end. They even give you some magic items. So this is almost like a miniature Dungeon Master's kit in your pocket that you can keep with you at any time, and that will allow you to expand the story of the mine after it's finished. I also love that this adventure serves as a kind of sneak peek for the artistic style of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. There is a lot of art in the rulebook as well, but because this is a full 64 pages, there's a lot more to work with here. You can kind of see all the different monster designs, there's a lot of maps, there's a lot of character art, and that's really cool to get kind of an idea of what they're going for. A lot of it is very realistic in tone. It reminds me a lot of 3.5, and that's pretty awesome. I can't wait to flip through the Player's Handbook for the first time, because when I was a kid, the thing that drew me to Dungeons & Dragons were the pretty pictures. I got to see all these cool monsters come to life on the page, and that still kind of inspires a childlike wonder in me, and so seeing that in these pages is really wonderful as well. One minor criticism that I could levy is that I don't like that these aren't hardbound books, they're softback, and I understand that's probably partially because they needed to keep this product under $20, but I often find that softback role-playing books take a pretty brutal beating over time because you just have to flip through them so much. Still, this is pretty wonderful cardstock and the art looks great on the paper, so I can't complain too much, especially given the price of this product, but I do wish that there was something a bit more hardbound for me to hold on to and to put on my shelf. Next up, we've got the character sheets, and I do have to admit, I find that these are a little bland. I don't love that the stats are along the side. I think they would be better suited across the top. I also just think that the way it's laid out in general is a little bit confusing. There's a lot to take in on this small page, but still I'm pretty impressed with the way it's laid out. I do wish that there was some color to this paper. I could probably print this out myself if I needed to, because it's in black and white. So I wish they were giving you something a little bit more than what you could do at home with some stock paper, but still, I really do love that they have these kind of story elements on the side that I mentioned before when we were opening the box. I think that it's really cool that there's this an entire chapter in the basic rulebooks on personality, on the traits of your character, on his flaws, and on what makes him tick. And I think that's pretty important, and it hasn't been a major focus in previous versions of the game. So this is pretty cool, I think. I also love that they give you some information on your class and your race, and on how to level up as you go. That's pretty important, especially if you're actually going to be playing through the adventure and leveling up as you go. That's a significant piece of information that you're really going to need. There are 5 included pre-made character sheets: 2 fighters, a wizard, a rogue, and a cleric. Pretty much everything you'd need for your standard D&D party. I can't say I don't wish that there were a few more options here, especially considering that this system runs a little faster than 4th edition did, so you might be able to fit a few more characters at your table. But still, 5 is a pretty great number, and I can't complain too much given how much is already in this box. But lastly, I'd like to submit a complaint with Wizards, because this is a problem with a lot of their box products. I had this issue with their tiles that they released for 4th edition as well. The box itself has a fake bottom, and I don't love that. You actually can remove it, and it's almost taking up half of the inside of the box. And the issue is that kind of is a little bit deceitful. It looks like you're going to get a lot more stuff in here than you actually do. And I also think, just from a retail perspective, you could make this box half the size and fit more on the shelf. But I'm not going to hold my personal problems with Wizards against this D&D starter set, because it really is one of the best bangs for your buck in all of role-playing. For $20, you can learn how to play this new version of Dungeons & Dragons. If you've never done it before, it's going to teach you how to role-play. It's going to teach you how to bring your friends together to tell a collective story, and why it is that this hobby is so much fun. So I really hope that you'll think about picking this up, even if you are a veteran player. This new version of Dungeons & Dragons, if you've been kind of away for a while playing Pathfinder or whatever, is very different than 4th edition. I think you're going to find that it holds a lot in common with the game that you loved when you were younger. And so for that reason, this is a great introductory piece back into the world of D&D that maybe you've left for a while. Ultimately, I think Wizards of the Coast knocks it out of the park with this one. Dungeons & Dragons is back, and I can't wait to see what they have in store for us in the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide. The starter set has done its job. It's gotten me incredibly excited. And for that reason, we're giving it a 9 out of 10. Don't forget to check out jetpackjoust.com, where you can find even more Dungeons & Dragons goodness, as well as other indie games, board games, and role-playing games. You can also find us on Twitter at jetpackjoust or facebook.com/jetpackjoust. Please like this video if it was helpful at all to you. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to get even more great content. And most significantly, please share this video with your friends if you think they're going to like Dungeons & Dragons as much as you and I do. Until next time, a Bill, a Murray.